Welcome back everyone. This is the third in a series of videos following the construction of this lumber storage shed. If you have not yet viewed the previous videos and are interested in seeing those before you watch this one, I have created a playlist on my channel for this whole build, so you can find them in order over there. Now that I have my posts up, the floor done, and strapping on, it's time to start on the roof. The first task is to get the back wall ready for the beam that will span across the length of the building. So I use a string line to make sure my cuts along the posts are nice and true, and the beam will sit flat and straight across the span. I made the cuts with a chainsaw and decided to show here up close what that looks like. I'm not saying it does the best job in the world, but for this project I am content. Maybe a little rough, and if I had access to electricity back here or maybe a really good battery skill saw, I might have went that route, but the cuts with the chainsaw worked out quite well for me on this building. I'm using some extra 6x6s for my beam across the back and front of the building. Normally with bigger buildings around the farm, in the past we used 2x10s as a beam for this type of construction, and I briefly considered that, but with having these extra 6x6s at my disposal, I felt this was a good opportunity to use them up instead of cutting new material. It is a small building and the roof will not be carrying a lot of weight. The spans are not too big of a distance, so I think these will work out just fine. It's always good at any new stage to recheck your level just to make sure you've not made any mistakes, and I should have looked at that a bit earlier before I had so many nails into the beam, but luckily everything was looking good. The back of the building only stands about 5 feet above the floor, so that made it easy for me to lift these up and get them secured by myself. I repeat mostly the same process for the front of the shed, but it is a bit more difficult for two reasons. Firstly, the posts are higher, so it will be more of a struggle getting the beam lifted up, and also because there's no strapping across the front posts, they're not currently secured too well. They are at the bottom where the floor is attached, but at the top they're not super sturdy yet, and I wanted some bracing to make sure they stay nice and stationary while I'm trying to get the beams up there. Well, it would have been difficult to hold the posts in place and try to nail the brace in at the same time. A light-duty ratchet strap worked well to temporarily hold it in place. I wanted to make sure I got these 3 posts nice and secured with a brace before attempting to lift the beam up on top of them, so I wasn't having any funny business with the posts trying to move it all on me while trying to lift up a heavy beam on top of them. With this video being a time lapse, it probably doesn't look too bad, but I actually had quite a struggle getting this lifted up here by myself. Especially since we have multiple tractors around the farm that could have lifted this up for me, I probably should have rethought the decision to do it by hand. These 6x6s are Tamarack, and they're not the lightest thing in the world. I do manage to get it up and secured in place, and that just leaves one more to get done. I do end up getting very lucky as my uncle decided to stop in and check out on the progress. After informing him of my little struggle to get the other side lifted up by myself, he was quick to offer his assistance to get the other side lifted up, and I was even quicker to take the help. Of course, this made the job much easier, and I was relieved once I had it tacked into place, because this would be the only really heavy lifting that had to be done on this job. The next morning turned out to be minus 21 degrees Celsius, the coldest weather we have had yet after a mild start to the winter. I took the opportunity to hide in the garage for a bit to get some braces cut, and then head out to get them installed. In my opinion, these braces are some of the most important and easiest things you can do to stabilize your building and keep it square over the long run. If you're not familiar with why you need them and don't know what a parallelogram looks like, just look it up. That's what your building will end up looking like. The floor and the roof and the walls may all still be the same length, but the building will end up leaning and no longer square. This is a simple method you can use to prevent that from happening. I will need to do the same thing, although it will look a bit different going from front to back on the building as well. But before I get to that stage, I want to get my rafters on, as a little bit of play in the building could actually help me as I try to get them installed. There is a method to do this with your speed square using the common scale to figure out all the angles you need to cut. On a small roof like this, I find the most foolproof way to do this is to simply trace around your beams onto the rafter, and that will give you a perfect template providing the rest of your building has been built nice and square. The trick is to cut into as little as your rafter as possible while it having maximum contact with the beam. Below I use my battery skill saw to get the template cut out. This is one part of the build that a chainsaw would be a little too rough for in my opinion. I will be using this green fiberglass, I believe it is, roofing. Steel would be a lot better, but I acquired this roofing for free from an aunt and uncle, so I will be putting it to use on this building. I measure it and find the center point of my rafter to cut it down to the proper length. I then do quite a thorough check to make sure it will work along the whole building before getting too trigger happy making them all up. The last thing I do while I'm here is to just vertically level the front of the rafter, as I may put a fascia board across the front in the future. I haven't decided yet, and I prefer the look of it being level even if I have no plans for eaves trough, which of course would not be useful as the water will shed towards the back of the building. It's still pretty cold out, so I decided to go inside, where I put a fire on in the wood stove and cut out all the rafters. If you're going to use this method, make sure to stay with the same template throughout. I have seen people using the last piece they cut as the new template each time, and by the time they were done, it's quite a mess because usually there's a small change from one piece to the next, and by the time you're done, it can be a big change. Thanks for watching, everybody. I hope to see you all in the next video, which will hopefully show me getting the whole roof put on.